Welcome back, Dead Ball Dancing. Justin, you don't know this,
I
but
don't.
we had a special episode of Dead Ball Dancing last Sunday
We
when we
did.
went to film our football show, and I had forgotten to change over all the assets from Dead Ball Dancing to football. So we had a very limited edition Dead Ball Dancing, where we talked about how bad the Minnesota Vikings are. And Vikings fans are pissed, man. They're unhappy with me because of some of the things I've been saying about McCarthy.
Well, I mean, again, this is a college hoop show, but I don't necessarily disagree with you. As a Bears fan, it's pretty much my duty to go ahead and hate on the Vikings. Essentially, I'm just a professional hater, Rick. So I'm glad to hear that you at least used our platform to hate on a team that is deserving of it, if that makes sense. So,
Well,
um,
I've got some more hate to throw around on today's show. So,
so do I, man. So do I.
welcome
Kick us
back,
off.
everyone. College basketball week 2 already. I feel like this is one of those seasons just going to kind of fly by.
Yep.
We've seen a lot of good basketball, some bad basketball. But on the whole, I thought week 1 was pretty good. Not a whole lot of surprises. Obviously, we'll talk about some of the ones that did surprise us. We'll talk a little bit about how one of us got the game of the week script dead on, and the other one was very wrong. I'm not going to name who's who. We can get into that a little bit later. But I'm looking at this board. And there's a lot of change on this board.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
numbers and colors on this board. But just as I started breaking down what was actually on this board, there's not a lot of real meaningful change here. There's a lot of movement, but in our top 45, top 50, really not a lot of newness and not a lot of change. Iowa State, obviously the only new team on this board. They only moved up 4 spots. So,
Right.
realistically, yes, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot we're going to break down and talk about. But did you feel like, outside of the couple obvious outliers, do you feel like week 1 really moved the needle for you on a lot of teams?
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of kind of the new teams, like I think you nailed it perfectly, Rick. Like our top 25 is really our top 25 for these first couple of weeks, until we start getting into a little bit of the meat of the schedules, right? And this is kind of a lot of the change that you're seeing on the board here. It's really driven by me. I tend to overreact in the shifts for my top 25, based not necessarily on result, but quality of performance. So, obviously some of the big ones that we'll get into, Arizona, Florida, things like that, are directly affected not only by quality, but by the result. But I'm not really expecting too many new teams to jump in and out of our top 25, at least through the first 3 weeks as the teams are going into their tune-up games. We'll get into some of the shifts here. But yeah, overall, no real surprises, with the exception of obviously the marquee matchup that we had discussed last week. So I thought some teams looked really good. I thought some teams looked bad. Like, honestly, I have Purdue at my number 1 slot still on my top 25, and I regret it, honestly, Rick. I don't think we're deserving of the number 1 spot right now. I think Houston, Texas Tech, and even Kentucky and Duke look better than us right now. So I think I'll make that change probably next week, depending on, the results of this week. But, overall, not really many surprises.
Real close for a
I
lot
know.
of that game. It was
Yeah.
not the impressive
Nope.
view. I mean, Oakland's not a bad team by any means, but
No, I mean, they're a tournament team, right? But I expected them to kind of beat them down like we did at Evanston or is it Evanston, whatever school that is. I kind of expected that performance too. So I'll make that change next week. But overall, really, what I'm going to be doing, at least for the first couple of weeks, Rick, is I'm going to be rewarding teams based on quality and results and punishing teams based on non-quality and results. So I'm expecting kind of this ebb and flow through the first 3 or 4 weeks.
I had a couple teams well outside my top 25 I just wanted to touch on. TCU and Boise State lose absolutely unacceptable games to lose. You don't see that often this early in the season, especially with teams that are quote unquote power conference teams. Boise State to a lesser extent, they're obviously much better at football, but they've had a good basketball team for a while now. And Oregon is trash. Hawaii managed to not win that game, but what the casual fan's not going to know in that 1-point victory for Oregon, Hawaii's starting point guard is probably done for the better part of the year. Didn't even play in that game, so Oregon won by a single point over a Hawaii team
You
that
called that too.
not whole.
You called that too. I remember you said that. I remember you said that last week. We discussed that if Hawaii ended up playing Oregon tough, that they were going to start making noise within your top 25. And that's one of those performances, Rick. I didn't mean to cut you off. Where it's like, for me personally, I wasn't paying attention to that game. But now that I know that only lost by 1 to Oregon, there's a chance I'm going to slide them up right to the top 40, top 35 teams in the country, in my opinion.
Well,
because
like I said, be careful, right? Because they don't have their starting point guards. So, they matched up well with Oregon in the spot. And I'm not sure what kind of drop off there is, right? Hawaii is not a recruiting hotbed for basketball by any means, but the system is in place. The defense is in place. So, I mean, keep an eye on Hawaii. The Warriors might do some work out west this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, as we're getting into, we might as well just kick off the full discussion, right? And again, as we talk about punishing teams for quality, you'll notice that, at least for me, and this is, I drove this, BYU's down 3 slots in our top 25, right? We harped on how bad Villanova essentially was last year. I like Nova. I like the coach. I like the way they structure their roster. I like their team, but they had a down year last year and they did not improve this year. And BYU went in and barely beat a horrifically shooting Villanova team by 5 points. And for me, I moved them from 4 down to 13 because you're not going to mosey by a pretty awful Nova team by 5 without consequences. 39, and we discussed this last week, right, Rick? We said their youth is probably going to be their downfall, and I'm looking to see if their youth is going to bounce back against an absolute gauntlet of a schedule that they have coming up in the next 2 weeks. 39% field goal, 66% from the line, and they allowed 10 made 3-pointers versus a Villanova team who could make barely like 6 to 7 last year. They got out-rebounded by 5. By 5? You have all this length and height, this youth with this athleticism on a BYU team, and you're out-rebounded by 5 versus a Villanova team who is extremely undermatched versus a BYU team on the boards. You got UConn on the 15th and Wisconsin on the 21st. Yes, I'm probably being a bit dramatic dropping them 9 slots, Rick, but I'm just having this premonition, like we discussed last week, that like what we said, the youth is going to come back and kill them. And, I think you're going to go up against a UConn team who's starting to look like a juggernaut again, and a Wisconsin team that we touched at length on last week. I don't see them kind of scratching the surface in those 2 games. I'm anticipating they fall in both of those because they aren't looking very complete to me at all. I promise I'm not just picking on them because our good friend is a fan. I'm picking on them because I don't like when teams are hyped up to the extent that some of these teams are, and then they're not following through against the teams that they should. So any thoughts on BYU from your perspective?
Yeah, I didn't think the drop was crazy. Kind of the way I do my rankings is comparing one team to another.
Yeah,
and they're not better than Purdue. They're not better than Houston. They're not better than Tech. They're not better than these Blue Bloods. They're not better than Arkansas.
No.
So, I struggled with where to place them.
Yeah.
I still have them up top.
5. Yeah, 5.
And the reason for that is because this early in the season, I struggle to say, okay, BYU is better than Arkansas, neutral field, right? Like, because they're not going to play that game. BYU is going to play their shitty Big 12 schedule. And I don't know. yet.
Yeah.
The Nova win was unimpressive.
Yeah. Agreed.
But we are high on Nova. So, if Nova is a good team, I struggle to
43.
really count that against BYU, right? Like we have Nova squarely as a tournament team in our aggregate rankings, right? So I
think
you're way higher on them than I am.
Yeah. 52.
But in our aggregate, they're a tournament team, right? So
yeah, fair.
I don't have a problem dropping them that far. I don't have a problem holding them kind of where we expected. Because it's small sample size. It's small results, and we'll see a lot more. So yeah, when I saw you dropped them down, it registered because it
Yeah.
was a bigger shift. But
Yeah.
I mean, really, if you'd put them at 25, I wouldn't have had much of a problem with it either. A Baylor team that we've talked a whole bunch of shit about, we both still have right around 20.
Yep.
So, I mean, everything kind of comes in shades, and we have bad teams in our top 25. We have really good teams outside our top 25, and there's reasons for those things. And I think BYU is going to show us who they are. I think last year's team outperformed their talent.
Yes. Yes.
And I think this year's team could really easily underperform their talent. So, we give the AP poll shit because they're just kind of shooting in the dark. Our poll is also kind of pulling on guesswork and feel.
Yep.
We're a little bit more tethered to reality, but there's always going to be spots where it can be like, all right, well,
Of course.
did Auburn deserve to drop 6 spots in a week where they didn't do anything really? They just showed up, played basketball, and we dropped them 6 spots. And again, like there's reasons for that. There's reasons
Which we'll get into.
I mean, I was setting you up for it. I was setting you up for it to just do it right now. But
no, we're gonna wait.
I mean, as these shifts, like Arizona at 10 and Florida at 11, that's a cop out. That's a cop out, and we don't know. We don't know what happens. If Florida drops their next game, they're not 11. And if Arizona beats another ranked team, they're not 10. So, there's a lot of shift in here. So I don't have a problem with BYU at 13. I didn't have a problem with them at 4. I don't have a problem with them at 7 in our aggregate. They're gonna be around a weakened Big 12. What's really going to matter for them is, can they get these 5-point losses to Nova out of their system before conference play? Because a 5-point loss to Nova is a 20-point loss at Texas Tech.
Right. And that's even a lot. Like, I guess that's where I'm concerned, right? Because we talked at length about Big 12 last week and how weak they are, right? But like, if that performance is stacked up against a weak Kansas team, like Kansas might beat them by 30. Like that's what I'm concerned about, because Kansas is still Kansas, right? And you still got some other juggernauts in the Big 12 that will capitalize on performances like we saw BYU have against Nova, West Virginia, right? Kansas State is still in the Big 12. Like there's teams that will exploit you. And even though the Big 12 holistically is a pushover, there's teams that can pop on any given week. And all of a sudden you take that type of performance, that quality of performance against a streaking Kansas State team who won 9 straight last year in the Big 12, right? And you're going to get dogged home or away. So I'm looking to see how they bounce back against a really tough non-con schedule. Kudos to BYU again for a really tough non-con schedule. And I'm keeping my eyes on this game that they have a week from today, Saturday. Where is that game? Is it in Connecticut or is it in Utah? Do you know?
I do not.
Okay. Depending on where that game is, and depending on how they show up, that could get ugly very, very fast. So again, I'm expecting to see more movement from BYU, either up or down, depending on how they perform in the next couple of weeks. But I'm keeping my eye really, really close on how that youth performs. Because as we get later into our discussion in the top 25, there's freshmen that are showing up, right? And then there's freshmen that still need a bit more development work. And we talk about these 5 stars, these recruits, these Ace Baileys, these Dylan Harpers, and some of them are showing up and some of them aren't yet. So let's see how BYU performs.
That's a true road game. That's at TD Garden in Boston.
That's going to be a very, very tough environment for BYU to go get a dub against a UConn team that looks very impressive. And I hate UConn. So let's see how it goes.
I know you hate UConn, but longtime viewers of the show will know that you love Blue Bloods. So, Justin, explain to me why Kentucky and Duke are in our top 5 with your love, your absolute adoration for Blue Bloods.
Oh, you're being sarcastic. Thank God, Jesus Christ. Okay. So for me, the Kentucky move was more of a shifting out of teams in kind of my top 10, right? Like, I was looking across the board and I was looking at Kentucky and they went and took care of business, right? They looked good. They even looked good in preseason versus Purdue, right? I kind of factored that in as well. So Kentucky, we just moved some teams around. A couple fell out, right? And so naturally for me, Kentucky was going to be in. Duke, I was incredibly impressed with the way that team came together and meshed after a pretty significant roster turnover from 2024 and 2025. Obviously, losing Flag, losing Malawak, we were wondering who was going to fill those shoes. And let's be honest, Rick, the Boozer twins are probably some of the most impressive freshmen in the entire country, especially when you look at the way they play and how mature it feels they are at basketball knowledge, for being so young. It's almost like, and I know, ode to Carlos Boozer, their dad, and the way that he used to play in the NBA, right? But it's that back to basket, right? Like, get a tough bucket, actual post move, good footwork basketball that I saw out of the Boozer twins, that had me actually really excited to watch Duke basketball this year. It's no longer this step back between the legs 3-point from 30 feet. It's get the ball into the post and let's work through the block to see and initiate our offense. And I really liked the way that Duke looked. Obviously, with Dan Snyder at the helm there, very, very impressed with the way that Duke looked. So I'm looking to see how they perform. Let me see what their upcoming schedule is for the next couple of weeks. But overall, really, really excited with the way that they look. Again, Texas, not that great, right? I'm not very high on Texas at all. But if they take that performance versus a Kansas team on Tuesday, November 18th, they might win by 40 points, right? So
look at the 27th.
Yeah, Arkansas, Duke, and then look at December 2nd, right? We're talking. We'll get into Florida a little bit later, but again, really impressed with the way they played. I love the way that they're scheduling their non-con, right? They got Kansas, they got Arkansas, they got Florida, and then they got a good Michigan State team in December 6th. Like, let's say they win all of those games, and we're not talking about Duke at just 5, right? We're talking about Duke at like a 1 or 2 spot. So excited to see how they play over the next couple of weeks. But I'm very high on Duke this year. Not so much Kentucky, but definitely Duke.
Well, and it's a testament to the athletic departments for these schools. The powers that be in college basketball have been very transparent about what gets you into the tournament. It's not quite as cloak and dagger as football. Right. So these teams know you need quad 1 wins. You need quad 1 wins, and we're seeing it. These big teams have all scheduled really, really well.
Yeah.
And it's giving us meaningful games in the front half of the season between teams that are going to be tournament teams. We have so AP poll, right? But we have so many ranked on ranked teams. Like, there are so many intriguing games on the schedule because teams have gone out of their way to schedule those. Yeah. And we have it all the way into December. So, we're going to know a lot about these top 30, 40 teams before we even get to conference play. And I think it's good for the sport because it gives normal fans, casual fans, more exposure to more teams early in the season, where instead of, Wisconsin beat up on the friggin' fighting Camels of Campbell, and that's fine, right? I'll take wins, and everybody's got their cream pie games, right? Their nonsense games.
Yeah,
cream pie is not the word.
Cream puff. I was gonna. That was.
Sorry, I gotta close this other browser tab. But there's a lot of teams playing good basketball, and it's good for the sport and it's good for the fans, and you're gonna get to tournament time and you're gonna know a lot more about these teams than you would if you just had a conference slate, whether or not your conference is tough. Having those big games on the front end. Like Nova for BYU. I mean, I'd rather they play tight against Nova than beat the tar out of like directional Utah. Like, it's more meaningful.
And I am with you on that. And that's what I think I couldn't have phrased it any better, Rick. You said, and I'm going to paraphrase, but you said no, not. Okay. You said we're going to know a lot more about these teams when we get to tournament time because they're not scheduling they're not scheduling like easy ass schedules. I love that, right? It feels like this year, with the exception of like the first 2 games, right? Everyone's got to have a tune up. it feels like the non-conference schedules have gotten better because these teams are starting to recognize that that's essentially what is going to sway you, tip you one way or another to getting into March Madness. And I don't want to get into a recap of the game of the week right now. I want to leave that kind of last before we get into the for real section. But I would argue that we already had game of the year in the first week of the season, and you couldn't say that last year, right? So I think you nailed it. And again, kudos to some of these teams like a Duke, like a BYU, like a UConn that are scheduling incredibly difficult non-conference schedules because it's going to have an impact on our rankings. If Duke loses to, if Duke's at 5 for us and they play Florida, who's 10 for us, and they lose to Florida, that's a good loss. Chances are that I'm going to move them down, but not dramatically. Whereas if Duke plays Little Sister of the Poor and wins by 40, I might move you down just because of how weak your freaking schedule is, right? So I'm kind of factoring that into our top 25 as well. You put it perfectly, man.
Last thing I have before I let you take your victory lap, I wanted to call out Arkansas.
Yeah. Yep.
They scheduled a little bit differently. They have their big teams in there, but they go big team, small team, big team, small team, big team, small team.
Arkansas.
They play Michigan State tonight. Follow it up with Central Arkansas, Samford, Winthrop, Jackson State. Then have a big game against Duke. Then have a big game against Louisville.
Texas Tech, Houston.
I love this Arkansas schedule. The team we saw last year was a lot of fun to watch.
Absolutely.
And young. And they had a lot of room to develop, and a lot of those kids are back. And this type of schedule with colossal games. I mean, Texas Tech, and then they play Queens, and then they play Houston.
Yep.
And then it's time to start your SEC schedule. And I love the way these games fall out. I love how the mid-majors that they are scheduled against are serious mid-majors.
Fresno, Samford.
Central Arkansas is kind of trash, but like Winthrop is good. Samford's a good team. Jackson State is a good HBCU.
Yeah.
So I like this for a developing team. I like this for what is essentially a second-year Arkansas. They're going to beat the brakes off of some of these little teams. And if they can ride that, you go into that Duke game, you have a real shot at Duke. So I just, hat tip to Arkansas. Good scheduling. They're still a really good team. Obviously sitting pretty high on both of our lists, up to 8 in this week's rankings. But watch out for Arkansas.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I moved them up on mine as well, because they did look pretty convincing, obviously, over Southern. I'm going to be keeping my eye on what happens with Michigan State tonight. Michigan State, you and I are both pretty high on. I have them at 12. You have them at 13 for an aggregate of what? What was that aggregate? Like 12? 13, yeah. So, they go in and get a convincing win against Michigan State. I'm probably going to move them up as well. Maybe even higher than Florida, just because they look a bit more complete right now. Quickly before we talk, last week's marquee matchup, I'm gonna go ahead and hop on the underdog train. We talk about mid-major basketball, right? And you and I love mid-major basketball. We love them now. We love them in the conference schedule. We love them in the tournament. And a big one that I was high on last year was Utah State. And I'm going to be high on them again this year. Huge win for Utah State over a very, very good VCU team that you and I both have squarely in the tournament. I have them at 32. You have them at 29. That's a pretty big win to start the year for Utah State. And they did it in very impressive fashion. 50% from the field, 46 from 3, and 70 from the line, while forcing 18 turnovers and to only 14 assists for VCU, where VCU has predominantly been one of those high-flying dynamic teams that takes really good care of the ball. 44 points in the paint to 26 for VCU. Again, I was high on them for last year for a reason, and I'm going to be high on them again this year because though they struggled in the tournament, and I had them winning the first couple of games. Obviously, that didn't happen. It feels like they returned who they needed to return and got stronger. So keep your eye on Utah State as they go throughout their non-con schedule and they go throughout their conference schedule. They didn't win their conference last year, still made the tournament, and rightfully so. They start the year off 2-0 this year. They got UTEP, they got South Florida, they got Fresno State. They got some really good games upcoming. I'm keeping my eye on them. And right now they are the best team in Utah. So if Utah and BYU play in the tournament, Utah State might win that game. So just want to give that call out there and throw a little shade at BYU in the in the meantime. Now, let's go ahead and get into recapping the game of the week. Again, I would argue, and let me know what your thoughts are, that could be game of the year. Like, we could look back at all of our games of the week at the end of the year, and that could legitimately be game of the year. Both teams fought their heart out. I think one of the things I said that needed to happen for Arizona to go ahead and take that dub was the freshmen had to show up. And I would argue that there's a chance that we're not going to see a more impressive freshman from last year to this year for the next couple of years than Koa Pete. 37-5 on 11 for 18 from the field and 8 for 12 from the line against arguably one of the best teams in the nation. I mean, you talk about getting it done, and the way that he got it done, man, it feels like, yeah, he knows he's going to the NBA, but he wants to win now. And I think that's what was missing from some of these big time names like an Ace Bailey, like a Dylan Harper that we saw last year. This kid wants it. And I think that's going to have a direct impact on Arizona's success, obviously, for this year. I was massively impressed by this team, Rick, and I'll turn it over to you in a second. But one of the things that you called out last week was who's going to fill Love's shoes. And, oh, yeah, Bradley had 27 versus Florida and stepped up in huge moments like Caleb Love would have done, right? So now you have this 1-2-3 punch of Pete, Bradley, and Barrios, 2 freshmen, and I believe a sophomore, a junior. And, man, like, there's not really a limit to how this team can perform this year. I would argue that just based on one performance alone and what I saw there, Rick, this team has a very, very good shot to contest Texas Tech and Houston for the Big 12 in both the regular season and the conference tournament. That's how impressed I am with this Arizona team. And last piece, this score wasn't necessarily indicative of how well they played on defense. You had noted Flandon Lee, who's going to step up? None of them. Like, Arizona contained Condon, Flandon Lee, and made all the other guys had to beat them, and they couldn't. And I was just very, very impressed with how they rallied on the defensive side of the ball, forcing 15 turnovers, coming back from down 12. Heck of an effort by UA. And I'm looking to see how they bounce back this week. Are they going to let this win go to their head? Are they going to bounce back and kind of make sure that they're taking care of business against some of these smaller teams? So, sorry, I know it was a monologue, but wow, what a good basketball game we chose.
When you hit the prediction dead on, you can take a few minutes to take your victory lap there. One of the big things I talked about was who the hell runs point here, right? Who does this game flow through? We thought it was Xavier Lee, and then Florida comes out late preseason and says, well, Boogie Flan's kind of the guy.
Yep.
Well, Lee and Flan both started. Lee and Flan both played 32 minutes. Lee and Flan both sucked.
Yep. So
my issue is that Xavier Lee took 17 shots, hit 5 of them.
Yep.
Flan, the 3 for 9 game from Flan for 9 points.
It's okay.
Game flow wise, I don't really care. It's not great. But if you're Xavier Lee, going 5 for 17 is unacceptable when you have other generators on your team, especially Boogie Flan, who was supposed to be the guy, right? Don't feed me bullshit off your coaching staff. If you're going to play them both for like equal amounts of time, one of these guys needed to be the replacement. One of these guys, the offense has to run through.
Yep.
And we didn't really see it. 8 assists combined. Now, granted, Florida shot like shit across the board.
Yeah.
But
22%. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't understand. They didn't get to the line. They didn't facilitate offense. I mean, Lee was 3 for 11 from 3. A lot of that was trying to catch up, right? I mean, they were only down 4 at the half. And they were playing like they were down double digits. They were like they just didn't play well, taking low percentage shots, not moving the ball around. That's one of the things we had talked about. Like, move the ball, get your open looks. Arizona's real big, real long. Move the damn ball and get your shots. And they didn't. They didn't play Florida basketball. They didn't play to their own talent level. And I don't want to take anything away from Arizona. Arizona was the better team on the court. They are probably the better team for the season, but without question, they were the better team on the court. So I just want to state that Arizona won this game. Florida didn't lose it. But Florida has so much talent, they shouldn't have ever felt like they were having to scrap for points. I think the biggest lead Arizona had the whole game was like 9.
It was 9.
Florida shouldn't have been putting up low percentage shots as frequently as they were. And when Xavier and Lee went ice cold, there are other shooters on this team. Get the ball to somebody else, and they didn't. Lee drove down the court, didn't pass the ball, chucked up a bad 3, and like I said, they were just playing like they were down by a lot more than they were against a superior opponent. And I don't think that's ever the situation Florida should have felt that they were in. And as soon as they committed to that bit, they lost. And it was about halfway through the second half. It's like they're not going to get back. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and so I'm just looking at, and I question some of the coaching decisions really quick. To your point, like Arizona shot 50% from the field, 40 from 3, and 82 from the line, 31. So Florida didn't defend without fouling either. And then you look at some of the coaching decisions that the Gators coach, I forgot what his name is. Again, Condon is struggling. We saw it last year. We talked about it last week. We said that we need Condon to make the leap that we were expecting him to do. 11 points, 6 rebounds on 4 for 9. You had Micah Handle on the bench with 11 points and 12 rebounds in like 6 less minutes. Why wouldn't you just play him? Why wouldn't you play? I just question some of the decision making by the head coach as well. And if they don't figure their act out, they're going to be in trouble. Because
Golden gets cute sometimes, and if he doesn't have, a Player of the Year candidate, that comes due. It comes due at some point.
Yeah.
Player of the Year candidate can hide a whole bunch of flaws.
Yep. So
I was not impressed by what Florida rolled out there. Obviously, most of your schedule is not Arizona, but you do have to play the whole SEC.
And including an Arkansas team that we just talked about who's going to be very good. So, new section coming up next. It feels like, huh?
Yeah. We talked about how some of these games are meaningful and some of these games are not. So, I just wanted to get a couple teams for you to call out. Are they for real or not? Are there undefeated teams who are bad? Are there winless teams who are good? The answer to that one's no. I looked really hard at the bottom, and all the teams that are 0-2 are actual trash teams.
Yeah, I'm with you.
If there's 2-0 teams that are for real or not, I just wanted to kind of highlight some teams we don't usually get a chance to talk about, or some teams in the top 25 who we wanted to have a different kind of focus on. My first one's Bowling Green. They're 2-0, and I think they are for real. This is a good MAC team. Which is, that's kind of a misnomer, I suppose. But the MAC has put out some good mid majors, and a 2-0 Bowling Green team who has played some convincing basketball so far. I mean, we had them second in the MAC coming into the season, so it's not like crazy. But if you're looking for a mid major who can make a little bit of noise, maybe it's that 5-12, right? Give me a 12 seed, and they beat maybe BYU, So watch out for Bowling Green. They could be a lot of fun to watch, if nothing else. But for more casual fans, keep an eye on the MAC. Just like football, the MAC there's a lot of parity in the league. So a lot of the games end up being a lot of fun and closer than you'd think. But watch out for Bowling Green.
Love it. I'm gonna keep it going with the MAC. I'm gonna go Miami of Ohio. So I talked about them as my favorite to win the MAC, and I'm gonna have to give my daughter here in a second. We talked about them being my favorite for the MAC. They went ahead and started off 2-0, including a win over an Old Dominion team, right? That was in the tournament as recent as 2020. So I like it. You know, you think about mid majors and expectations versus reality in a way, and they're not going to be scheduling Florida. They're not going to be scheduling Arizona. They're not going to be scheduling Kentucky. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But I like when a Miami of Ohio team goes out and gets a good win against a pretty standard tourney team in Old Dominion. So good win for them there.
Hey, keep burning, so you
Keep
can
burning.
get some of these in.
Yeah, you're good. So, and if anything, I'll just hold her. So I don't stress. Iowa State. I'm gonna go. Yes, they're for real. I thought that there was going to be a significant drop off. I'm still expecting it to happen maybe later in the season, but started off 2-0, and they started off in convincing fashion on the defensive side of the ball. 20 turnovers and 19 turnovers forced in back-to-back games. And we talked about their pedigree from last year and being that stout defensive team. I thought they were going to lose it. They didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, Iowa State could definitely be for real. Let's see how they perform in the non-con schedule. I'm not going to get as high as I did on them last year, but 2-0 to start the year for Iowa State and doing it in convincing fashion. Yep, they're for real.
Number two defensive rating for Ken Palm. So I mean,
yep,
haven't fallen off there.
How about not for real, Rick? What do you got for me?
Yeah, you know, I've got a Cal team. I got a Cal team that's sitting here 2-0, and I'm not buying it. We've shit all over the ACC.
Yep,
they beat Wright State by 10. They beat a really bad C sub team by 27, both at home, right?
Shitty arena too. I hate that arena.
Yeah, I'm looking at the rest of their schedule here. They play what?
Who do they play?
Cal State Fullerton next. And then Kansas State. And then a Presby team that like they should blow off the court, and then like Sac State. And I'm just looking at this and it's like, what do they have to do here for me to think that they're real? They're going to lose to Kansas State.
UCLA. They're going to lose to Utah.
You beat up all these other teams, right? You lose your UCLA game, you lose your Utah game, you beat Pacific, you beat Dominican. Like, I don't know. If they only have the 2 losses coming in the conference play, then they immediately lose to Louisville and we're done talking about them, right? So
Agreed.
I don't know what they have to do to matter, but the 2 games that they've played so far, no, absolutely not. I mean, this is the same team from last year. They're not good.
No, they aren't.
So they're a 2-0 team that could probably, if they upset K-State, they could be undefeated going into that UCLA game. And I think at that point, like a 7-0 Cal team is probably still not ranked. And then UCLA is going to wax the floor with them. So that's one for me. They are not real. No one needs to worry about undefeated Cal.
Agreed. Love the call out. They're freaking. I don't know if you've ever been to Berkeley's arena. It's so bad too. It's like you thought ASU's was outdated. Like it's like walking into something from like the 1940s. The stairs are like this. Yeah. So you know what? Screw Cal. And I love the call out. I'm gonna go not for real Auburn. And I touched on them last week a little bit. They look like ass. Do you know where Bethune-Cookman is? Is that a D1 team?
Louisiana.
Is that a D1 team or is it D2?
Yeah.
That's the problem. Is I don't even know if they're D1, and Auburn needed overtime.
Daytona Beach.
Florida. Is that Florida? That's Florida.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, they needed overtime to beat a Division II team. They allowed 51% from the field, 55% from 3, and 44 points in the paint, and got outscored in the second half. They let 3 guys on Bethune-Cookman score over 20 points. This is I'm going to call them a Division II team. I'm going to be honest. I could have played at Bethune-Cookman. Not kidding. They have University of Houston on the 16th, and they have the University of Michigan on the 25th of November. They might lose both of those games by a combined 50 points if they play the way that they played against Bethune-Cookman. And then, oh yeah, congratulations, you beat Merrimack by 28. Like that doesn't impress me at all. And the way that they've scheduled their first couple of games in the season, Bethune-Cookman, Merrimack, Wofford, and then their first real game is against Houston. Yeah, go ahead and have good luck with that, buddy. Like this Auburn team is in for a world of hurt. And I'm not anticipating them to be 2-0 for long. So give me not for real, give me frauds, give me whatever you want to call it. Auburn 2-0, not going to last for long.
That BCU team lost by 40 to Miami on Thursday night.
Yep. So by 5 to Auburn, and then by 40 to an ACC team. I get so disappointed. I get so disappointed when these teams, like, I wish they would have lost that game. Bethune-Cookman obviously deserved it more than they did, and it makes me so mad that these bigger teams skate away with these wins. Like Auburn 2-0. I hope they go 2-6 in the next 8 games. So yeah, give me frauds.
Game of the week is a big one.
Yes,
starting in about 2 hours.
We're watching that. Oh, we're watching that. Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm going to watch polo today, so I'm gonna have to watch this one tonight.
And why is that, really quickly?
Polo's awesome.
No, that's incorrect. It is our very own host's birthday today. He's turning.
It's not actually
28.
my birthday. It's my birthday party, but I am turning 28 later this month.
Yeah, he's turning 28. Looks really good. We're talking about treatment for the hair. We're working on that. Obviously, we might fly him over to Turkey for his birthday present. But
take it off my back.
Happy birthday to the host, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Anyways, kick us off. Let's get it.
Yeah, Bama and St. John's here. This is a big game early. Number 18 and number 9 in our rankings. 15-5 in the AP poll. So, I mean, this is one everyone's got their eyes on. It's a standalone game. It's pretty much the only big game in the early slate, in the 10 o'clock slate out here. This one is at the Garden, St. John's true home game. So I'm excited to see how these teams square off against each other. Bama obviously has had a tune-up game. They were fine. But now it's time to play some basketball. This is a big one to start with. And I am not entirely sure that Bama knows what's coming their way. This is not the same Bama team. And this is a St. John's team that is much the same. They are much better on defense than Alabama is. I think St. John's defense outmatches Alabama's offense. Philbin is not Sears. I don't know if anyone thinks that. He is not a 1-for-1 replacement. So, this Alabama team with, the players changed around a little bit, but, there was a coach at Iona who beat this Bama team with a very similar offensive system. I can't recall who that coach was, but
the name's escaping me, but I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe they're related or something, but
something like that.
This exact system, this exact team at Iona beat this Alabama team. So more resources, better players, battle-tested St. John's. I think that there's a chance we see history repeat itself, but at scale, because St. John's is not Iona. St. John's is a real tournament team.
Yep.
So what I'm going to be looking for here is for St. John's to win, but also for St. John's to play in a way that makes me think they're ready. Because if you look at their schedule, this is kind of it for St. John's until late December.
Yep.
They kind of coast from here till their Big East schedule. So you need to play this game. Obviously, the win's huge, right? The win would be huge. But this is your last chance to go up against a real team. Yep. And then it's maintenance games. It's maintenance games until your Big East schedule. And I don't like that. We talked in the earlier segment about how well all these big teams had scheduled. Yep. And, we're scheduling years and years out. So I understand why St. John's doesn't have big teams, because nobody was scheduling St. John's because they sucked. I get it. It's not entirely in their control, a 2-year turnaround here on games. But I think it might be a detriment to them as we go into the Big East season, because they're out of chances to show what they can do. So I'm looking for them to beat Alabama. And it doesn't even have to be a huge win, right? But they have to do all the things they do well. I'm looking for a phenomenal defensive performance, and I'm looking for enough of a indicator on offense that shows me they know who they are and they know how they're going to play against good teams. So those are kind of the things I'm looking for. I'll let you get a little bit deeper into the X's and O's, but I want to see St. John's play well enough to prove to me that they can sit for 2 months and then come into the Big East schedule and play really well.
Yeah, perfectly put. My keys, and yeah, I think we're going to be touching on a lot of the same things. But my keys for Bama, and I have this in the last bullet. I'm kind of go in reverse order versus what you see on the show notes. Is stagnation is game over, right? Like Bama has an issue where they sometimes have the ball get stuck. It doesn't really work around the perimeter. Does not really penetration and dish, and if you take that same issue, right, let's call it an issue, in against a St. John's team who picks you up full court and forces you to initiate offense 45 feet out, you are going to have problems. They must keep the ball hot. What do I mean by that? If I was the coach of Bama, I forgot what his name, Mark something. I would tell them that no one can hold the ball for longer than 4 seconds. Like that would be your key to victory versus St. John's, because you have to tire them out. You have to tire them out because they're conditioned well and they will pressure you for 35 seconds, possession over possession. They need to generate quality looks. Last year, they were 5th in the nation in 3 points made, but they're not going to get open looks versus St. John's unless they keep the ball hot. Turnovers. We know that this Bama team can be turnover prone, and that's not going to work against a defense that was essentially #1 overall last year, top 20 in points off of turnovers, top 8 in steals, and forced 22 turnovers in their first game this year, along with 12 steals. They have to take care of the ball. And, you know, they won their tune-up by 30, but to your point, like Sears, in my opinion, was the Walmart brand version of Walter.
So disrespectful.
It's true though. Sears was like the Walmart brand version of Walter Clayton, right? And he was amazing. Like he was their centerpiece of their team. And losing him, who's going to bail them out when time gets tough? They're going to have to find a more balanced effort because they don't have that centerpiece in Sears to help bail them out when the shot clock gets down, and they're going to need that against the St. John's team who's going to force you deep in the shot clock, possession over possession. St. John's. One of the keys that I had that we've discussed at length about was how are you going to get better on the offensive side of the ball, right? We know that their defense is going to be just as good, and I got to be honest, if not better, than they were last year, especially from a wanting it standpoint. They looked very impressive in their first game. I said, how are the transfers going to step up? And I got to be honest, again, it was just Quinnipiac, right? But the big transfers, Johnson Sannon from ASU that we talked about, and Isaiah Sellers, who came over from, I believe, Indiana, looked very comfortable in a revamped offensive scheme. Sannon with 12, 4, and 4. Isaiah Sellers with a very balanced 6, 5, and 5. They looked really comfortable operating the offense. And as long as the transfers come in and take quality, smart shots, I don't see a way in which this Alabama team can overpower a defensive juggernaut like St. John's. I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout, but I think it's going to be a barn burner, a tough, gritty Big Ten style game that St. John's is going to turn this ball game into. And I think that really does favor a St. John's team who is used to playing under grit and grind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think Vegas knows what's going on here. The line on the screen was good this morning. It was a change from yesterday, and is now different again. Wow. So this is 5.5 St. John's right now. The total is all the way up to 172.5. This opened 168. So you know, Vegas is expecting a high scoring game. I mean, 5.5, what that tells me from a betting standpoint, that's a late closeout for St. John's. And, you know, their game fits that. You know, I could see it being tight, and then they're better on the boards. They're better on defense. You know, Bama starts pushing at the end. You close out a 6-point win. That feels plausible to me.
Agreed.
This total is giving me a lot of pause, though. I'm not I'm not sure there's 170 points in this game. Because if St. John's is playing that type of defense you just were talking about, how does Florida score 80? Or Bama score 80? You know, like how exactly game script wise does it get to that point? Like, because that's St. John's winning. What would that be? Like 80 to 74?
70, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like it. It doesn't fit the narrative, right? It doesn't fit the statistical profile we have for these teams. So I like the under. I like St. John's to cover. You know, give me St. John's by essentially the spread, 6 or 7 or 8 points, but tighter at the end, and they kind of close it out with elite level defense to put the game away.
Yep, and I think you and I are going to pick the same team here this week. As you know, I'm pretty high on the way that St. John's plays. So I'm actually going to take a surprisingly, if I was going to bet, I would actually take a bit of a high scoring game. I think that St. John's, with the improved offense they have, they can kind of play in both ways. I think it's actually going to be a bit of a bigger margin, though. That's just the feeling that I'm getting. Give me like 85 to 72 or 73 St. John's. I think you know, St. John's is maybe going to take their foot off the gas towards the end of the first half and let Bama shrink a gap. And then I think second half, Rick Pitino tears him a new asshole in the locker room over halftime. And they come out and play the St. John's style of defense that we've become accustomed to over the past 2 years. And I think they end up by about a 10 to 12 point win margin, St. John's in the Garden. Or Madison Square. Sorry.
Solid set of games here for the first real Saturday of hoop season. Obviously our game of the week, Bama St. John's, and then you got Arkansas, Michigan State, and sneaky nightcap. You have Oklahoma Gonzaga as the last game of the night. You know, a lot of people are going to look away from this one because Oklahoma's not ranked. Gonzaga's an 11.5 point favorite, which I think is kind of crazy. This is a good Oklahoma team. So yeah, I mean, solid day of games. This is going to be a lot of fun all day long.
Absolutely. I was about to say that in closing. So it sounds like, by the way, you and I are both picking St. John's, just to round out that conversation.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So Holy Cross BYU at 7 p.m. You know, BYU is going to win that game, but just watch out. Holy Cross was a tournament team last year, a team that, you know, Rick and I were high on from a mid-major perspective, I believe, as well last year. Could be a little interesting. BYU should win. A couple other ones that I'm looking out for. Monday, just really quickly. Michigan State, Iowa State. Where do we have? We have Iowa State at 25, and I believe, and I said Michigan State, Mississippi State at 26. I'm going to keep my eye on that game. Winner of that game is going to probably get a little bit of a boost in DBD's top 25 here. And I think you and I are both pretty high on both of those teams. So should be really interesting to watch. Wake Forest, Michigan on Tuesday, November 11th. Wake Forest in an ACC that you and I are talking about has a chance to be resurgent this year. Wake Forest, a team that should have made the tournament last year. It's early in the season. You never know what can happen. Michigan's a very good basketball team. Expect them to win that game, but expect them to be tested by a really good Wake Forest team. Kentucky, Louisville on Tuesday, November 11th. That's going to be an absolute beast of a game. I'm looking to see how that game turns out. I expect a potential upset by a really, really good Louisville team this year.
Yeah, Tech in Illinois on Tuesday too. Super Tuesday, a good one. That's usually a good stack of games.
Absolutely. So, good basketball this week, Rick. We got a fun one to recap next week for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. Good luck on all your bets. Make sure you get on Chainlink and pick the game of the week. Yeah, and we will be back with you at our normal time slot, I believe, next Saturday, 8 a.m. Mountain Time. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be up and scheduled. But thanks for joining us early on your Saturday morning. This has been Dead Ball Dancing. I'm Rick. He's Justin. And we will see you next week.
Happy birthday, Rick. Happy birthday, Rick.
Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you.